Hi, everyone. Welcome to Creators Anonymous. My name's James, and today, filling in for Seth, I have Sawyer.
Hello.
And on today's show, we have the DM from the Crit Show, Rev, or
Hey, how's it
Brandon
going?
Wentz. So, Brandon, quickly give us a quick rundown of what the Crit Show is.
So the Crit Show is an actual play podcast where we primarily play Monster of the Week, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game, which just requires 2d6s, and the rule book is pretty slim. The players only need 2 pages, basically, to play, and they actually play as themselves. That's kind of our strange little hook, is that you get to know the characters and the players at the same speed because they are playing as themselves in what we call the other side of the coin dimension. And then as the show goes on, they actually start dimension hopping, spoilers, but it lets us cover other Powered by the Apocalypse games, and so they go into some other worlds as they discover that they need some other things to defeat one of the monsters they're dealing with.
How did you and your other players meet? There's Deej, Jake. I'm forgetting one person.
Yeah, Taz.
DJ, Taz, that's it. Okay.
Yeah, so TJ and Tass and I all went to undergrad together, so I've known them for quite a while. And then Jake, when I first started off role-playing, I played a bunch of Earth Dawn. That's what I learned on. It wasn't until almost like about a year and a half ago that I ever played D&D. I've played role-playing games for 20 years, and I just had never encountered D&D. I was taught a bunch of other games first. After I got out of grad school, I decided I wanted to play again, and I posted a Facebook status just saying, hey, I'm going to run some Earth Dawn if anybody's around and wants to learn how to play. And Jake responded because I knew Jake through comic conventions. And so that was kind of how the three of us got together or the four of us got together for the first time.
Do you have any real difficulty running a 5-player group?
There's only 4 of us.
Well, oh yeah, you're right.
4 players.
Yeah, 3 players, myself.
Yeah, I was like, you kind of play like 30 different people.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's talk about your other personality.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, have you ever came across any major difficulties with? Because I think the biggest game I've ever been in was 3 players, including the DM.
Really?
Oh wow. Yeah, I mean, for me, the sweet spot is 3 or 4 players. That's where I find the best kind of click and the most opportunity to show the spotlight on different characters without feeling like you're kind of getting stuck focusing on one character for weeks and weeks. When we run games at like conventions, we go to Gen Con and other conventions and we run Monster of the Week. We usually set those tables up to be 5 players plus a GM. That's kind of at my max. Like, what if there was another person? I think it'd be hard to give focus to anybody. The only game I've ever played was just 3 people counting the game master. When we first started playing together, Tass and myself and Jake is really big into mysteries, and so we started running a game that we ended up calling Further Investigation that was set in Pathfinder, where we played kind of like a Holmes and Watson, and it was so much fun. That actually was the original kind of concept for the podcast before we ended up changing it, and it's still something we might try to do if we get the opportunity and we find the right game system to run it in. But it was a lot of fun because it was just us solving mysteries.
I don't know. That sounds like a perfect Monster of the Week.
Yeah.
In the Monster of the Week, it is considered like a gritty reality kind of tabletop RPG as far as it goes. What's it like playing a system like that?
So, like I said, when I first started, I played mostly Earth Dawn, and then after that I switched into Pathfinder. I really like the Monster of the Week system. I'm a huge fan of Powered by the Apocalypse now. Whenever we switch to play something else, it kind of gets a little difficult because so much of my background is theater and film and TV. The idea of the more collaborative, narrative-driven moves I really enjoy because, our show, we really try to edit like a radio play, so that you get the sense of, okay, the moves that they're getting are based off of the things that they're describing. And when they know that they've got to describe the moves to trigger them, it creates a better kind of overall narrative for anybody who is either playing and not in the scene, or anybody who is listening. You know, in our case, anybody who's listening from home.
That's fair. And especially your players have to kind of take a second to examine a situation, because getting hurt in that is it doesn't just exactly go away on the next morning.
It's a much more dangerous world. You know, the thing about especially Monster of the Week, I would almost say with Powered by Apocalypse, I would almost say with Powered by the Apocalypse in general, but really with Monster of the Week, if you are someone who's like, oh yeah, I'm the game master, I'm the dungeon master, and I'm gonna kill my players, it's super easy in Monster of the Week. You could kill your players in the first 15 minutes. What makes this much more collaborative is that you've got to find a way to go in, to encounter the monster, to learn information about it, get away, find its weakness, because you really ultimately can't kill a monster in Monster of the Week, or it won't stay dead anyway unless you have its weakness. So it's super easy to kill players in this game if that's what your drive is. So I think it makes for an environment where everybody's working together to really tell the best story they can tell.
Yeah, just not to be a spoiler-filled thing, but Soulbat.
Yeah.
I'm all caught up on your show. Like, I've been there since episode 3.
Yeah.
So I loved the whole first time we went through the Soulbat arc, and I was just like, man, that was awesome. I really want the car suit to come back with all the headlights.
Yeah.
But I really like the fact that now you got to face this old thing again, and it's not just the Soulbat, it's the Soulbat on steroids. Like,
yeah.
You might as well just be like, yeah, we're gonna have The Rock play this round. So he's gonna be the Soulbat.
That's the nice thing, actually. If you've been there since episode 3, you've actually been there since week 1, because our very first week we released the first 5 episodes. So you've been there since week 1.
Oh, yeah, I've been there since week 1.
So there you go.
Yeah, so I'm really, really happy about that.
Nice.
I was dying when I started funding you guys on Patreon, and you guys were like, and our newest Patreon, Dub's Nuts. I feel like I know this guy. All of you guys were trying to guess who I was, and I was just like, yeah, that's me. It's my old PlayStation handle. I'm sorry, I've had this forever.
Oh boy.
So I had a really good laugh at that. But the one thing I really love about your show is you guys, every decision has a consequence, and everything is not just, hey, I'm going to plug this battery in and go. It's going to be, hey, I'm going to plug this battery in, and by the way, it's also going to use that one only diamond that can't be found anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
So,
or that she just happens to have in her pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, hey, I just happen to have this in my pocket. So I really enjoy how.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, I really enjoy how, like, they could nonchalantly, you'd be like, hey, you see there's a lighter on the ground. Later, that lighter's a big roll. So
yeah.
I like how every little thing is used. I would hate to see your notebook.
Yeah, I love throwing in little things like that too, because it gives me stuff to build on later, even if I don't know the relevance of it in the moment. I kind of keep this big conspiracy theory chalkboard in my head that's got all the different lines and the pictures and things connecting, kind of like Charlie Day.
Yeah.
But, Margaret showing that she's got that diamond, and then, it's 50 episodes later and we meet the ex-husband. And so it's fun to throw in little things that you're going to get to come back to later.
Nice.
And honestly, that's a good show of a good DM. I mean, that's a perfect whatever it's called, I don't know, mark. I guess good mark of a DM is to always have that thing in your back pocket. You'll just bring it out and just make it into something so fantastic, because it's just some anonymity of something becoming a major part in the story is just, it throws your players for a loop, but it makes it so memorable.
Yeah.
So speaking mark of a good DM, how much of this have you scripted out into your head? And I don't mean like what everybody says. I mean, like the path that you've taken them along. Like, did you have like a solid line? Like, this is where we're going to end up, or through the player's choices, you just had to work on the fly, and this is just happened how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, the story that I had in my head was not nearly as good as the story that we have now because it was just one person's input. It was me in my head going, this is what I think will happen. And in the first episode, when I really gave into the idea of, yeah, these roles have ramifications, whether it's, oh man, here's this thing that I set up that should have been really hard and they got a full success, so they've just stomped it. Or, man, I really want them to succeed on this, but they just failed, and that's bad news. They get a hard move now. The story is not at all what I ever imagined it would be. And when I prep a story now, basically all that I prep is a couple locations, the monster and its moves, and then some NPCs. I give the NPCs, whatever their desires are. Do they want to be helpful? Are they, just kind of what their motivation is? But everything else, the twists, the turns, are all based off of their roles. And there's no good way, like, if I had a direction I wanted the story to go, there's no way to force that and have the audience not see it. Because the die results are right there. Like, oh, they failed this roll, so something bad's got to happen. I can't be like, oh yeah, so you kind of get it to work and you guys get in the door, no problem. It doesn't stay true to the story. So I'm real big about honoring the die rolls and turning the story from there.
That's one thing I really like about your show is it just feels like you guys are so. It feels like you guys are improvising everything, and you're like, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? What roll die? Crap. Yep. I'm gonna do this instead.
Yep.
So.
But it makes for such a dynamic story and storytelling experience that it's fantastic. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to do it this way.
Yeah, when I want to play a game of my own, I'm always thinking of the Crit Show in my head. I'm like, okay, how can I make this sound like the Crit Show?
Oh gosh, not too similar, but yeah.
Well, not too similar.
Of course.
I'm just like, man, I want to flow like you guys do, because you guys
have got it down on point.
Yeah, you guys are pretty on point with your stuff.
Well, and that's the thing too, is that if you are listening to the show at home or if you're recording your own show, you're not hearing the 2 hours worth of kind of fine-tooth editing I do, because that's the other big part of the show, is that I do edit it like a radio play. So if it's not, and I've talked about this before, that for us, if it's not humor, heart, or horror when it comes to Monster of the Week, it gets cut. So there are chunks of stuff that I might edit out if there's a bunch of us having to stop and look up the rules, or if there's some jokes that are made that don't necessarily might not read to the audience or don't make sense, or it's an inside joke for us that the audience wouldn't get, because I'm really trying to generate the feeling that you're there at the table with us. So we don't want to make any jokes that the listener doesn't get, but we also don't want to get bogged down in like, oh man, what does this move do? Oh yeah, let me get the book. And so we still want to teach people how to play the game. That's one of our big things, is that you listen to the first story arc, and at that point you should, I think, be able to play the game no problem, because you've heard us discuss the rules as they're doing them. But I also, I want it to still be kind of crisp and quick. We don't have many episodes that are over 55 minutes, I don't think.
Yeah. I do remember taking a tally, and I was like, okay, I'm going to mark in my phone every time there's a hold and they don't use it. And I think the last time I was up, I was like, okay, I think Tass has like 55 holds he hasn't used.
Yeah.
What can he do with those?
Yeah, and it's crazy because you'll get those hold, and for anybody listening who doesn't know the game, so you have moves like investigate a mystery or read a bad situation, where you roll a die, and depending on your success level, you get X amount of hold, and you can spend those hold to ask questions. And there's a pre-generated list of questions that help you understand the environment or the situation better. But they're kind of connected to that environment. So if you roll investigate a mystery on something and you get to hold, you ask one question, and then you decide to act on that information and you take off to the next place, you effectively lose that question, because you're not in that location anymore. And so, yeah, I think that there ends up being a lot of burned hold, because they get the first idea and they're like, oh, yes, okay, we got to deal with this. And they'll take off, and kind of get themselves out of that situation where they would still have hold remaining.
They do that quite a bit, actually. I'm sitting here like, really? They're only going to ask one question? Why are you guys running with this? I'm like,
and I think part of it is,
pay for that.
Yeah, part of it is just trying to be honest and like playing as themselves, because they're like, okay, yeah, I would grab this idea and I would run because we do it in life all the time, so it makes sense that it would happen in the game. Because that's the tricky thing about them, playing as themselves, is that they don't have that layer of character to hide behind. When you role play in a game, you're like, okay, so these are the elements I like about this character, and so this is what I'm going to kind of show about myself. But for this, they're being themselves. So decisions that they make that the audience hates or loves, that's in part something that they could be like, oh gosh, they hated that I did this, or oh, they loved that I did this. So there's a little bit of bravery required to kind of really be yourself in a situation like that, because the audience could be like, oh boy, you're an idiot. And you're like, yeah, I know. What do you want to do about
it? Yeah, there are a few times that I'm just like, guys, get all your information before running. We're just talking about how you take it and run, and you don't stop to think, and then you do it again. So, but you guys make it flow so well, and I edit all of my podcasts and everything, so I understand, but the normal person doesn't. And when I'm listening to a podcast, I try to take the editor side out of it, because I rather just listen to the podcast for what it is. I don't look for those like little sound cuts where you can tell where there's an edit or anything, which you, by the way, are amazing at editing, because you don't hear a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
So
that is thanks to Jeff O'Brien, my old college roommate, who now is the sound. He teaches sound in Nebraska. He's sound designed for a bunch of shows in New York and at the Shed. And when I first decided to do this, he spent about 3 months just in little like hour-long chunks teaching me how to edit and work Audacity to get the sound quality that we've got. Because we recorded the show initially with 4 $9 microphones.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, so he taught me that it was all process. If you could process the sound correctly, then the equipment, while nice, you didn't have to have the equipment to do it if you knew how to work the editing side of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't got a very expensive microphone either, so I rely on my whole editing and sound levels and everything to get everything going. And I'm still learning the like nooks and crannies of Audacity, but I tip my hat to you, because you do an amazing job editing.
Well, thank you.
How important personally are stories to you? Just stories in day-to-day life and telling them.
I mean, it is, for me personally, it's the most important thing. It is what I do in every aspect of my life. I went to undergrad for theater. I went to grad school got my master's in acting. I have been a comic reader since I can remember. My bookshelf is filled with Stephen King books and his giant connected universe. He's actually a big part of the inspiration for some of the story. It is what I love to do. I love to share stories. If I can get someone to come into a theater or turn on a podcast or whatever, and for that half hour, they forget about a problem they're having, or they laugh when they were feeling really upset, or they think of a different way to look at something that had been bothering them, even just for 10 seconds, for me, that is what I strive for. Like, that's my little weird way of trying to make the world better, is just through entertainment, through laughter. I was always, when I was in grad school, my very first acting coach wasn't quite sure what to do with me, because I was always more of the mindset of the entertainer than the actor. And the entertainer, in my mindset, has that eye on the audience to see like, oh, how are they reacting? What do I need to adjust? Whereas, the actor really gets into it and they kind of lose the audience. For me, it was always about reading the audience to adjust the next moment so that they would get the most out of it. And I think a big part of that carries into the show, that as I'm playing the game with them, I'm also listening with the ear of the producer, thinking, okay, does this track? Does the story make sense here? Does this emotional beat land, or do I need to spend more time here? And so I also then carry that into my editing. So it's very important to me. It is the crux of what I do, really, in all aspects of my life.
That's awesome. That's super cool. And as part of this particular story and stories that you have been telling, what has been your personal, and you may be, I don't know how biased you would be as being a DM for this question, but what has been your favorite moment in these current stories?
Sorry, throwing the hardball.
It's hard. My favorite moments, I think, are when the players come up with something to solve a problem that I never would have imagined. There's a particular moment in season 1. It's right, I think it's like episode 20, where they're trying to figure out, there's this person that they need to get a hold of, and they're not sure how to do it, but they know the person is out there in the world. And so one of the characters has special abilities, and they decide to essentially stage a big fight so that news cameras will show up and show them on the news doing this, showing they have these fascinating powers, in hopes of drawing out this other person that they know either used to or still does have these same type of powers. And I could not have fathomed that in my wildest dreams, that like, oh, to try to get the attention of the person we need, I'm just going to out myself to the world as a superhero in a world that doesn't exist. And that's a ramification now that he's going to have to carry with him for the rest of the story, because people saw him fighting a giant monster on the news. 1, they didn't know people could do that. 2, they didn't know those monsters existed. And so they drastically changed the world, and they all came up with this plan together, utilizing each of their skills to make this moment happen. And that's a story I never could have conceived of, let alone written. And so those are the moments that I love the most, are things where I just sit back and they run with it, and it doesn't require any input from me.
That is fantastic. That's such a fantastic answer to that. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And in regards to that, as you are running the world behind the scenes, you play as a DM. You have many faces. You have many different people you play in this world. And as you run it, I, as a personal DM, have had a few, particularly NPCs, who have attached themselves to my heart. Not as much as some players or some characters I've played before, but some NPCs in games I've dealt with have just been, they just carved that little bit in my heart.
Yeah.
So during this, have you ever had an NPC that you played who you've just been like, every time the players go back to him, you just smile, like, all right, let's go? And
yeah,
Hold on. What's the little robotic elf's name again?
Jingles.
Jingles, yeah. That's the one I absolutely love.
Yeah, Jingles is great. People love Jingles. He was something that was just kind of another one of those things that was a toss away that ended up coming back in a big way. Whenever we do a live show, I love being able to do Damien. Damien is this demon that they've encountered. I really like Trog and Landara from season 2.
I love Trog.
And I've also got a huge soft spot for Everett as well, because Everett is actually a character that originated. Every now and then we do a live stream on Twitch of a game that Tass runs called End of Days, and it's Monster of the Week, and it's just kind of his own world. And so I was playing in that, and that's where I created Everett. And then in our story, I needed a helicopter pilot, and he was one in Tass's story. I thought, oh, you know what, I'm going to bring him over. And so I've got a soft spot for Everett too, just because he was a character that I played that is now an NPC in my world. Yeah, it's real hard to say though, because the thing that gets me the most is people's reaction to the characters when they hear the voices again. I got a lot of messages about Eston and Baba Yaga, about how much those voices creep people out. And
yeah, gosh, that's That's super cool. It's so fun as a DM to have that feedback from not only your players, but I would suspect from an audience, being like
Yeah.
showing the love to characters that you've put time into and that you've been able to show to the world, and them kind of globbing onto it and having
It's
important part of it
it's really,
shown, I guess.
you know, getting online and seeing that someone has made fan art of a moment that you and your friends have created in a story, or having someone write to you saying that, oh yeah, I really liked this element of your story so much so that I took it and I ran it in my home game, or I love that stuff, because that's really, for me, a big part of this is just giving people who haven't played these games the opportunity to play, just giving them the tools of either how to play it, or giving them actually, like we have a couple of mysteries on our website that there's a mailing list, and if you sign up for it, you get one of these mysteries. And so, just having those elements there for people to use in their own games is really cool, and it's really flattering to know that, like, oh yeah, someone really liked this monster, and they now made it in their world, and it's like the big bad for their hunters, or.
That's so cool. That's so cool. I'm so glad that you guys can be such a inspiration to a series of people who want to run games like this. I was just gonna say, because a lot of people sometimes take that and they take it with the lack of a grain of salt, and they take it as an insult that, oh, what I created is not to be touched. It's mine.
Oh yeah.
But for you guys to just be like, go with it, do it. That's so cool, guys.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
one of my goals is to actually turn more of the main story to go back to like season 1 and actually put out the mysteries for those if people want to use them. I love the idea of people using the locations or the monsters or the NPCs or whatever in their own stories.
You should also do like a D&D equipment guide for all the stuff that you guys have made.
Yeah. We do have the shopping list, or not the shopping list, but the equipment sheet, how that all works. Since there's not really a way to get equipment in Monster of the Week, we generated a gear point system.
Yeah. I just love how you guys have the whole, well, on top of that, it's like one of the characters is always making the weapons, or
Yeah.
in the new case, the cursed shotgun that you got to kill something with to use it.
Yeah.
Like that one is like, when you started talking about that shotgun, I was like, oh, this is gonna be problematic. And a part of me was like, okay, they could go two ways with this. They're gonna go, okay, I'm gonna go the good side where I shoot birds on a telephone wire, charge up my gun. And then I was like, but what if they go dark and they start shooting hobos on the street? Like, what is this? Where's this gonna go?
Yeah. I remember giving him
I-
that and him saying, "Oh, that is problematic," because that's the for that spell, when he used it, it's like, oh, the spell has a problematic side effect, and I gave him that result, and I just remember him going, well, that is problematic.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, he's gonna take this two ways. But you mentioned that you took Everett from another game and brought him over into this. So does that, in your mind, does that kind of link all like your games together? Like, hey, Everett's over here, but he's not a helicopter pilot over here, and this is kind of like the Marvel universe where it's canon all in one universe, or is that just?
It's actually kind of more like the multiverse, like with DC or that Marvel had for quite a long time. That Tass's world is number 76, and the one that I run is number 316, and that they are all parallel universes that run at the same time. So you might see recurring characters, you might see recurring themes, and that's actually kind of what we leaned into. One of our Patreon shows is called Tales from the Omniverse, and it focuses on a different story every episode, and it is kind of the idea of we have this big computer in the game that monitors all the alternate realities. And so the idea, Jake actually put this really well in one of the descriptions, is that you imagine a camera looking at a big bank of monitors, and it's all playing out different stories that are showing different things going on inside this multiverse. And the camera zooms into one screen, and we see a story, and then we pull back and we zoom into another screen and we see a story. So in my head, if you were to zoom in, you'd see Hero Salad, which is one of our Patreon shows. You'd see Tass's End of Days game. You'd see, the Pugmire game that we played. You'd see Coin, which is, the main show. That they're all just different worlds running at the same time that have linked elements.
Yeah, you remind me of the TV room from The Matrix.
So in regards to that, you have a lot of shows, you have a lot of stories, you have a lot of things that you do, and with that comes traveling, comes going to cons, going places, and just seeing a lot of people and meeting a lot of people. What has been your favorite place that this show has taken you?
I think it's actually going to the really small cons. We went to, or not even we. I went to Midwest, or no, Midwinter Game Fest up in Wisconsin, and it's in a hotel. There's X amount of people there, and it's just big rooms of people running games. And instead of sitting down in front of an audience and running a show, I sit down at a table with 4 or 5 people and I run a game. And so that's what I really like the most about conventions, is getting the opportunity to run this game for people who have never heard of us, who have never played it before. Because not only does it give them a new experience, I ran a game for someone who it was literally his first game he ever played. And he came to play it because there was that article a couple months ago now. I think it was like in the New York Times, there was an article about Monster of the Week and its rise in popularity. He's like, I read that article and I decided to sign up for this game. And so getting the chance to encounter people who have, always wanted to play a game and just never have before, I think is probably my favorite thing, compared to like going to the bigger cons and doing shows and stuff like that.
Wow.
So one of the cons that you constantly go back to, you try to go back to every year, is Gen Con. Are there any other cons that you want to make an annual trip to?
We actually have had a hard time getting into the kind of the con setup for Dragon Con. I really like Dragon Con, and it's unlike really anything else I've ever gone to. It's kind of a huge party and chaos, but in a good way. And the last time that we tried to go to Dragon Con, I emailed them and was talking to them, and they weren't sure whether we belonged in the podcast group or we belonged in the gaming group, and they just kept shuffling us back and forth and then never placed us. So if I could figure out how to get us into Dragon Con, I think that's a great one to go to. I went to grad school in Georgia. I've got a lot of friends there. C2E2 has always been one of my favorites. I was supposed to go to Emerald City Comic Con this year, but of course that got closed down. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, Gen Con, obviously it's in our hometown, and Dragon Con, if I can figure it out, and I'd love to go out west to Emerald City Comic Con.
Yeah, we were so looking forward to Emerald City. I live right in the Seattle area, so
yeah,
our big one's Emerald City Comic Con.
Yeah, we had set up to. I was just coming out by myself, and we actually had set up to do a live show with a bunch of guests from the gaming industry. So I'm hoping we can get it set up again, next time when it comes around.
August. They're bringing it back in August.
Oh, okay.
So I'm hoping you guys can still make an appearance, because if you do, please believe, message me, I'll buy you a beer. For sure. Yeah, the one thing I know about Dragon Con is the legends of the after parties are literally legendary. They're like, the con is great. It's what happens in the hotel rooms afterwards that's even better. And I'm like, what happened to the hotel rooms? And you got to be there.
Yeah, before I went, I asked a bunch of friends who had gone. I was like, so what's it like? And they're like, I can't really explain it. I'm like, that's a bullshit answer. But then I went, and someone afterwards was like, what's it like? And I was like, I can't really explain it. Because one moment you're, at a parade, and, you've got, some famous writers in a parade, and you turn around and there's Pennywise riding up the elevator, and there's all the characters from, Fifth Element taking shots together, and you go down the stairs and there's a whole army of Spartans, and it's crazy. But you have to like that chaos. I like that kind of chaos and energy. I've got some friends who not so much, so it wasn't their favorite con, but
The one thing I really like about Emerald City Comic Con is you never know who you're going to bump into. And when the trailer for Deadpool got leaked, let me hold on, air quotes, leaked, I went to Emerald City Comic Con that year, and Deadpool just walked up to me and started messing with me and poking me with his sword, and I was just like, stop it! And I finally just handed him the chimichanga I was eating. Took off his mask, and it was freaking Reynolds. I was like, wait, what? So, like, you never know who you're going to meet. Real quick, dude, you're green.
I'm green? Oh, no.
I don't know why.
Oh, now it's fixed.
It's happened about
like,
3 or 4 times that you just
it
randomly
keeps blinking
turn
in green. I was like, what is going on with my screen?
Yeah, this place that I'm living at now, I built it on an old pirate ship, and so it just rocks a lot and it just makes me seasick.
Oh, jeez.
It's the dry sometimes.
My gosh, that was good.
I just went back to you guys' live stream of Sea of Thieves. Hey, there it is again. You're green.
Weird.
Technical issues.
Oh well.
So yeah, you guys do a lot of stuff, like you stream Sea of Thieves. Are you guys on anything other than PC? Like what consoles do you guys stream on?
We stream from PC, but some of the players play on Xbox.
Nice. I keep wanting to play Sea of Thieves, but A, I don't have a PC powerful enough for it, and B, I'm on PlayStation.
Oh, fair.
So in regards to your story and how everything develops, you kind of hit this at the very beginning. How important is character development to you in your stories?
You know, in the sense of how the characters learn new information and how they progress. You know, again, for anybody who's not familiar with Monster of the Week and most Powered by the Apocalypse games probably aren't meant to be run as long as we're running, because you only get a certain number of level ups. You progress, you level up, and you get a new move, or you add to a stat. It's not like D&D or Pathfinder where you can go up to level 20. It really is kind of built to level up. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's not many more than 12 or 13 times, I think. And so I will try to find narrative ways to change their playbooks, and that'll be based around the things that they have encountered, the things that they're dealing with, the things that are really affecting them or influencing the world. And so for them to start as just a group of 3 friends who kind of stumbled into this thing and now are being tasked with this larger task, that progression is so important, because who they are as people, as players, and who the characters are now, it's such a wide difference. When they first started playing in that first story arc, they were themselves playing as themselves, and of course now they are themselves playing as this over dramatized version of themselves, we'll say, because of the things they've gone through, the things that they've experienced. It's a much wider breadth of experience that they've got, and so that change drives so much of the story, and it drives so much of the decisions they make, which drive the story even more. And so I'm very fortunate. I don't have to stop them and be like, hey, this person just died. Does that, like, how do you feel about that? They go into those scenes on their own. And so while it is super important to me that they have that progression, it's not something that I have to worry about, like, making happen.
That's always a really good thing as a DM, when you can trust your players to run parts of the story and have them take it into their own hands when you don't have to be the one rolling the ball.
Yeah.
So I have a total spoily question, and I've been wanting to ask it for a long time.
Okay. We'll
I don't want to put you on the spot. if it's too bad, I'll edit it out. So you guys all started out with the original playbooks where Jake has a big old thunder hammer and he's a champion, and Tass was the scientist, I believe, and Deej was like the gunman. I might have that mixed up.
Yeah,
So,
those
but
two are
either way,
flipped, yeah.
yeah, okay. But do you guys have plans to go back to those original playbooks? I only ask this because I really want Jake to get his hammer back.
I will say this: I don't have plans to make it so that they couldn't do those things. With Jake in particular right now, there's a huge problem standing in the way of him becoming that again, and so they would have to figure out how to solve that problem. For Tass and TJ, it really all depends on. Again, it depends on the story progression. There are things that come up. It's like, oh yeah, that would make sense for you to lose these powers and go back to being the mundane, or for you to give up this weapon that you've gotten and just become a company man again. So yeah, really, I don't close any doors. That's not much of an answer, but it's the kind of answer I've gotten very good at giving over the last year and a half.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I understand Jake's trial and tribulation that he has to overcome to get back to his champion status. But
yeah,
I don't know. I keep feeling like I'm like, man, this is all like the Herculean trials where Hercules went through all those trials and then he was restored his strength and he got to be back to his former glory and all this stuff. He just was wiser at the end of it. And I'm like, I feel like that's kind of the path that Jake has put himself on. I don't know, like
one can hope.
Yeah, that's the big one I'm hoping for. I'm like, pick up your hammer and smack some people around. Come on. So I have one real big. This could be very spoily, but I hope it's not. Your main villain or the guy that you set up as your main villain. How did you settle on just a big bad vampire that's trying to destroy the gods? Or I don't want to say destroy the gods. I guess that's just the motive that you've kind of been hinting at, and kind of where I've been feeling like it's going. How did you settle on this big bad villain?
So part of it was, again, just as things unfolded. Like, I knew I needed to pepper in somebody who was in charge of the location they were at in kind of in the second story arc when they were in Hawaii. And so I placed him in there kind of as the boogeyman. And then as the stories started to go on more and more, I found more ways to link him into what was going on. And so, if you've ever seen like, what is that, Edge of Tomorrow, where when the world, or even Days of Future Past, an event happens and a ripple goes out and it kind of changes the world that they're in. That's really how I write my stories, is that, okay, here's where we are, here's what's going on. And they make some huge decision that makes a huge change, or they have a huge failure or a huge success. For me, the whole rest of the story ripples and shifts and becomes this new thing. And so I don't have any idea how it's going to end. I have an idea in my mind of, this is where I thought this was going, and we'll find out if that's actually where it is going. But as of yet, there are very few things that I have wanted to have happen that have worked out the way that I thought they would. They're few and far between, maybe 2 or 3 things I can think of where, like, in my head when I wrote the story, I thought, this is how this is going to happen. And it actually plays out that way because it's the player's decisions, it's the dice rolls. There's so much luck and chance in that you never know. And so Grigori Nash was kind of birthed with the world as it grew and evolved. And then once I knew what his plan was, then a lot of other points started to click and make sense, and I could adjust some of those things to be part of his kind of machinations.
Yeah, whenever you talk about Grigori Nash and how he's feeling, or well, what he's doing and everything, I always think of he just ran out of my head. Oh my god. Sometimes I think of Doc Ellis from Back to the Future, and it's you. The only reason I say Doc Ellis is because you look at Doc and you're like, how is this bumbling idiot a professor? But then he starts talking and you're like, oh, this guy's way more intelligent than he came off to be.
Yeah.
And with Grigori Nash, even his alter egos in other universes, he's still way more intelligent than he's supposed to be, and he's like this mastermind. Like, I guess if he was an anime character, he'd be that guy that like puts his glasses up and they go all white, and he'd explain some super intelligent reason why everything just happened. You're like, oh.
Yeah, for me, he's very much because this is a character that I have loved for so long, so there's no way to not admit that he's influenced, but he is in big part to me Magneto, because that to me is, that's a great villain, the villain that understands exactly what they're doing and why, and it's for the greater good from their point of view. You can't just be evil to be evil and sustain that character for a very long time. You can have characters that are just evil to be evil, but they're probably not going to be your emotional through line for the side of the bad guys.
Yeah, I feel like he's a bad guy, but he has an immense reason of why he's the bad guy.
Yeah.
And he has a solid reason. I guess he's that character that he's like, look, if I have to be the bad guy to accomplish my goal, so be it.
Right.
So, yeah. But go ahead.
I was gonna say, and it's interesting the way that you hit it such a nail on the head on good story being, even the DM doesn't know how the story is gonna end, and starting it from the beginning, you're in the background and you're digging around trying to find the story as best as everyone else, and just as you hit this little thing and it starts growing into this bigger thing, you may be the first to unearth this big statue of a, like, holy crud, this character is now going to be this is fantastic. And of course your players usually presume, oh, you had that fleshed out from the beginning, and it was just as fun for you to find out that this character was this, or was this important, that it was for them as well.
Okay, well, we're gonna let you go. We're gonna get off of here and wrap this thing up. So thank you so much for your time.
Yes.
I have 1,000 more nerd out questions, but I'm hitting my time limit. I might just send you a big long email like, please answer these.
Please tell me all these
things. We don't have time. Let me nerd out with you real quick.
That's what you started.
But thank you so much for coming on and letting us pick your brain and just finding out the nitty gritty about the Crit Show and everything.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And I'm glad you guys are being safe during this whole pandemic thing going on.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of sad that there might be some delays in a new show, but I understand.
Yeah,
but that's a sign of a good show.
Yeah. But thank you very, very much.
Yes,
and thank you everyone else for tuning in to Creators Anonymous. If you know of anybody that deserves to have their story told, or if there's an artist out there that you feel needs to have a platform to talk about their work and who they are, please contact me on Twitter at CreatorZAnon with a Z. You can also email me at CreatorZAnon@gmail.com. And you can chat with me live at the Cast Junkie Discord. Brandon, where can these people find you?
Yeah, so for me, you can find me on Twitter at Rev Deschain, Deschain, for those of you who know your king, and I said before, he's a big influence on me. And the Crit Show you can find at thecritshowpodcast.com, and you can find at the Crit Show on Instagram and Twitter, on Patreon, and also on Twitch, where we stream some video games and every now and then live shows of Monster of the Week.
So here, where can people find you?
Nowhere.
Sitting right here.
We're working on Sawyer.
Sitting right here.
Right here. If you want to talk to Sawyer, you got to talk to me.
You're like the gatekeeper for Sawyer.
There we go.
We're gonna get Sawyer on some social medias.
Yeah.
But thank you again so much for spending time with us and letting us pick your brain. Have a great weekend.
You as well.